All right.
It's just not, we don't want to show that it's not showing, is it?
Nope, you're good. And I can edit it now that we have it, so I'm not that worried about it. I'll take that. Thank you. First, let me shake your hand. Coach Maloney, thank you for letting us interview you today. And this is for my management 601 class.
Okay.
And it's just on the topic of leadership. My group decided that I knew you were qualified enough, and we were excited to talk to you. Our first question is just go ahead and state your name and your position here at Ball State.
Yeah, my name is Richard Maloney, and I'm a head baseball coach at Ball State University.
And how long have you been a head baseball coach?
Well, the first go around, I was 7 years at Ball State. Then I went 10 years to the University of Michigan, and then I'm starting my first year back at Ball State here this season.
And we're glad to have you back, Coach. We're definitely glad to have you back.
Thank you.
And describe your journey. Was there a moment that you know that in your life you knew, I want to be a coach, I want to help lead other young men?
Yeah, Blake, I think even at a young age, I knew that I wanted to have a chance to impact others. I knew that. And the reason why I knew that is I had coaches who I played for in the variety of sports I played. I played football, basketball, and baseball in high school. And those coaches had such an impact on my life that, quite honestly, I knew at a young age that there would be a possibility that maybe I'd end up in coaching. But I was so driven to be a Major League Baseball player that that took a back seat. And then as my minor league career started to be in question on whether I'd make the big leagues or not, then my mind started to give much more thought to it. And then I was fortunate enough in the off seasons of my professional baseball career to work as a permanent substitute teacher, thanks again to one of my former coaches, John Blatnick, who had great influence on my life. He was my basketball and baseball coach in high school, and still to this day is one of the most influential people in my life. Because of him, he got me in the school system. I started to coach 8th grade basketball and 9th grade football, and enjoyed it immensely. And then I knew, that's when I truly knew that when baseball was over, I wanted to be a coach.
Very nice. So would you say, Mr. John Blatnick, is that correct?
Yeah.
Would you say he influenced you the most as your coaches to get you into the profession?
Yeah, well, without question. But I had others as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. and Mrs. Blatnick were kind enough on the weekends. They would take us to various college events, and they would invite other boys, like for the baseball end of it. A lot of guys would go to the basketball ones, like at Jennison Fieldhouse or at different venues, college venues that the Blatnicks would take us to and offer to us. But baseball-wise, Rich Maloney was the only one who would go. And so I would spend a weekend at games watching doubleheaders at the University of Michigan. We'd go to Western Michigan. We'd go to a variety of different places, but predominantly Michigan. Mm-hmm. And because of that, that influence was great. But I had other coaches. Matt Bojo was my football coach. We still keep in touch to this day. Bob DiStefano was another baseball coach that had a great influence on my life. And Fred Decker was an equal to Mr. and Mrs. Blatnick. And Fred Decker was my college coach who really got me started at this level by giving me an opportunity after my professional baseball career was over to get into college coaching. And those opportunities are few and far between. And Coach Decker had to change from an infield hitting coach to be the pitching coach so that I'd have the opportunity, since I was an infielder, to do that. That's a big change.
Definitely, that's a big sacrifice.
That was a sacrifice. So he saw something in me that meant a lot to me and encouraged me, and to allow me to be on his staff. So I certainly wouldn't be here without Coach Decker.
Very nice, very nice. Definitely helps when you have people help you along the way. And you've been coaching then for a multitude of years in both Ball State and at Michigan. Mm-hmm. Was Michigan always your dream school to coach at, growing up in Michigan?
Yeah, it was. It was my dream school to go to. Mm-hmm. Growing up on the east side of Detroit, most of the people, I'm sure there would be some Spartans out there for Michigan State that would say that's not totally true, but in my mind, most of the people where I grew up always were Michigan fans. Okay. And so I had this dream to go to Michigan, and then unfortunately I was a late bloomer, or you could say fortunately I was a late bloomer, meaning that my body at that time physically, when I graduated my senior year, I weighed 146 pounds. And that was definitely on the light side. Where Michigan was taking guys who were already fully developed, the Barry Larkins of the world, the Mike Waters, the Casey Closes, those types of players. I ended up becoming a player, not like Barry Larkin, but like the other gentleman, as far as working to develop my talent. But right out of high school, I wasn't as developed, so I went to Western Michigan as a recruited walk-on, and it ended up being a very positive experience for me.
And just to backtrack on that a little bit, do you think knowing you were a recruited walk-on and knowing you had something to prove, do you think that helped shape your leadership style, knowing you worked your tail off through college to get where you were to play professional baseball, to follow your dream? Do you think that affects how you coach today?
I think without question. It really became a staple of who I am, because I had an English teacher when, actually now, let me see, it was 6th grade, Mrs. Dawson. Mrs. Dawson was a fantastic teacher. What Mrs. Dawson, I started having her in 5th grade, and then I also got to have her again in 6th grade. And she encouraged me academically like no other. So I always did okay in school even before that time, but she started to challenge me to try to get all A's. And because of that influence, it just changed me, like I got motivated. And again, it's another teacher coach per se that mentored me in my lifetime. It made a difference. And because of that, though, I always had something to prove, because there was always other people that were smarter than me. There was always other people that could run faster or were stronger physically than I was. Even though I was gifted, I mean, I still was a good athlete in all the sports, but physically there was others that were a lot better. So I always had to have something to prove. And then just the way that my parents raised me in such a way that just really encouraged me and gave me a great environment to grow up in, and let me dream a lot and encourage those dreams. Never thwarted them in any way, and for that I'm very thankful. And so I've always been a dreamer, and I always saw myself being someone who would be successful. So in other words, when I saw someone successful, I said, now that person, someday I want to be able to do that.
Right.
And that's how I kind of, in every facet, so whether it was from a coaching standpoint, a player standpoint, all the different walks of life that I've been a part of, listening to a preacher preach or listen to a speaker speak, I always started to see where I might be able to have an impact. And so anyway, that's kind of where it came from.
So what you described there is being a visionary and seeing yourself be successful, which is obviously the first step in being successful. And I believe that you have to be at least some sort of visionary to be an effective leader, because you have to realize where you want those who you're leading to go. You want to know what the end goal is. Do you think being a visionary and being able to see the bigger picture and see the destination along with the journey is one of your main strengths as a leader?
Yeah, I would say that I've been blessed in several different areas, but just fortunate in life, just being surrounded by so many great people and just wonderful human beings in all different walks of life. And certainly in journeys in baseball, by going through all the different states I got to go to. I mean, here I grew up in about 1,100 square foot home with a family with a lot of love, with very average resources, but never once, I wouldn't trade my childhood for anything. And so with that kind of a mentality, my parents always encouraged me to vision beyond how I grew up. And I'm thankful for that. And because of that, I was always able to see myself in a different light and challenge myself to get in a different light. And I think I've tried to pass that on to the teams I've been able to coach and teams I've been able to be a part of, is to look at ourselves bigger than just what the average person would. Like for someone, mediocrity might be acceptable, and that's okay. And a lot of people live in mediocrity. But the way that I'm wired and the way that I like people around me to be wired is to think out of the box and think bigger. Yep. And I'm a big picture type of a person. That's just how I'm wired. So I think being a visionary is critically important to being a leader, because if you can't paint a vision for people, then there's no way you're going to achieve full success, because they won't be able to see where you're taking them. But if you can paint a vision and they can buy in and believe that over time that can happen, now you've got a fighting chance. And so I think that's one of the great things about coaching, is you can inspire. Like I was inspired by my coaches, I hope that somehow, some way, that I can be an inspiration to help people attain a higher level than maybe they would have sought for themselves.
Very nice, very nice. I can definitely agree to that, and you do a great job of it, Coach. And then, what would you say are some other strengths of yours as a leader?
I think as I've gone through this coaching now for 17 years, I think some of your greatest strengths can also be some of your greatest weaknesses. And I think when you start, so a strength would be is learning where you're maybe not as good, or maturing or growing to where you understand yourself better. We
Right.
had the privilege of having, of what you attended with me, this Billy Bean thing. And Billy Bean, my understanding, could be a pretty intense and emotional guy. And one of the reasons why it was difficult for him to be the star in Major League Baseball, that a first-round draft pick with 5 tools, you would want to expect. But reality is, the way that he was wired, it was, for his skill set, it kind of pulled away from being a great baseball player, because of how it would wear on him when he failed.
Right. He was so good, he wasn't able to cope with not being able to
Exactly.
be good.
And so, here's getting back to answer your question, is I think over time we start to learn about ourselves. And we start to realize that, maybe when I was a bit younger, some of the intensity wasn't channeled as good as it hopefully is now. You start to learn that as much as a leader needs to be able to verbalize, he also needs to learn to listen. And so over time, I think like one of my strengths is that I've been able to be a pretty good communicator. And that's been a positive. On the flip side of it is, I probably haven't been as good of a listener as I need to be, or would like to be. And so like over time you start realizing that about yourself as a leader. I think good leaders start recognizing their strengths and their weaknesses, so that they surround themselves with other people who can help them in some of the areas maybe they're not as strong in.
Skilled, yeah.
And I think Billy Bean was truly evident of that in how he talked. He says he's constantly said that, both at the dinner that you and I were at, as well as the speaking engagement, was the fact that he surrounded himself with these people that he would say are much smarter than him. Well,
Right.
They might be smarter than him from an intellect standpoint, but he's super smart in the fact that he recognizes that he needed those people around him.
Right.
He
He's
could
not too
identify
proud to
that.
say, I need help here.
Yeah, he couldn't
When you
identify.
put yourself around good people, you're going to bring yourself up in the process.
That's right.
Right.
And that's what you have to learn. So.
Okay. And what do you think is the hardest part about being a leader, and especially you're in the college setting with the young men, 18 to 22? What's the hardest part of your job to work on influencing them?
Well, one of the greatest things is the opportunity to influence. That's what leadership is. But to influence that age group when it's at such an important time in their lives is outstanding. And the flip side, one of the most difficult things is to influence them, because they're also trying to find their own way. They're trying to develop who they are from a young man into a man. And a lot of times 18 to 22-year-olds, with their limited frame of experience, at that age with the testosterone the way that it is, seem to think in many cases that they have it figured out better than those who have much more experience. And so the challenge is earning their respect, being able to cast a vision for them, to be able to help them see that they have a great opportunity of positive growth that can occur if they're willing. And to help influence them to think beyond themselves. So those challenges make coaching so great.
Right.
Because when you see a person turn a corner in such a positive way, there's something that is so great about that it fuels you as a coach, because in some small way you think you had some positive influence. And if in some small way you did, then all the time that we put in, and the time we're away from our families, and the time that we sacrifice gladly, becomes a real positive. And then you get that sense of accomplishment, saying that, you know what, that was really good. That was really good. This guy's doing really good. In just a little way, I hope that I had some positive influence.
Very cool. Is there ever a moment through 17 years, have you found after you've been with this team for 4 months, I've now reached guys, or do different guys get different light bulbs at different times?
That's a great question, and I do believe that different guys get different light. All of a sudden it clicks.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that happens right at the beginning of your relationship with a player, and then other times it might take 4 years, and for some, as crazy as it may sound, it happens after the fact. I've had some players that I've coached that haven't had it too often, but have had it happen where I think the relationship was real mediocre, and then years after, it became really strong.
It just blossoms after.
Yeah, I think some of it is just the experience, and I think some of it's both ends. I think as a coach, as we get older and we experience different things, we hopefully get a little bit wiser. And I think the young student athlete between 18 and 22 realizes over time that when they know that you care about them, which that's never been an issue, then it becomes, there's a certain time when they reach a certain point of maturity that finally a light bulb turns on and says, hey, you know what? He was actually looking out for me. That was actually a positive, and I just didn't see it at that time. And that's when you have a chance to, so the relationships actually, they're on all different levels at different times, which is actually another thing that makes it beautiful. Mm-hmm. But to have a great team, you just have to have, in my opinion, you have everybody pulling in the same direction. When you have that positive energy and everybody truly believes and everybody truly sells out and everybody's truly 100% in, which isn't always. It's not a given. It just doesn't happen.
And that's what makes it so beautiful when it does.
That's right. When it comes together, and that's why you see some great stories because in the sporting world, because for whatever reason, a team that on paper you would say, that team doesn't match up against the other team, but yet they win. And they win consistently during a certain season because they got the chemistry. Everything is just light bulbs turned on at the right time. Guys pulling the same direction. Everybody's caring about each other, and then you start getting the positive mo going, and before you know it, you're having a ball, and you say, man, that was pretty incredible what we just did.
Right.
Those are awesome moments.
And just to kind of correspond that to like the business world, would you consider a company like Apple went through the same thing where nobody gave them a chance in their early stages? They hit bankrupt. Steve Jobs brought him back from the depths, and everybody bought into his vision, and now they're a successful company. Do you think that's the same thing in the sports world as a team that nobody expects and they finally come together and win a championship? Is that
I think absolutely. I think the correlation between business and sports is so uniquely tied. I mean, the same principles that you would do on an athletic team apply to any business organization. If you really think about it, we're all part of a team. Mm-hmm. The successful businesses that are run, they're team oriented.
Yep.
And there's buy-in, and there's great enthusiasm and passion for whatever it is that the product they're selling. Well, in sport, it's the same way. So I think the correlation between two, you have to have teamwork, you got to have hard work, great work ethic. You can't be worrying about punching a clock.
Right.
Successful businesses that are run, they don't,
stop
people
8 to
work
5.
till they got something that has to get done, they're gonna get it done.
Right.
Okay, that's the kind of mentality that you have to have, whether you're in the athletic world or in the business world.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a visionary, like you had talked about. The leader has to be a visionary, and people have to buy in. You have to know your clientele too. So you gotta, I think one of the things Billy Bean brought up yesterday, which was, I think, applicable to business as well as applicable to athletics, was the fact that they know who they are as the Oakland Athletics. They don't try to be somebody else.
Right.
So he found his niche.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we have to do at Ball State. We have to identify our niche at Ball State. When I was here the first go around, we knew what our niche was. We were able to, when we brought in kids, we normally could, if we brought in 10 guys on official visit, we could get 7 or 8 of them. One is, we recruited the person who would fit our niche.
Right, right.
And we identified them very well.
So you found the piece of the puzzle, and the piece of the puzzle fits.
And
They
it
wanna
fits,
be
they
here.
want to be here.
Right.
That's exactly right. So now versus having a mass quantity, like you look at all these people and then you kind of,
Just take a guy just
Take-
because you take
yes.
him, and then all of a sudden you think you have a guy who's talented enough, but if he's not the right fit, the puzzle's not going to come together.
that's right, that's exactly right. And so there's some advantages, and like this, what I liked about what Billy Bean said yesterday was that, you know, there's some advantages he said that the Oakland A's actually have over the New York Yankees, even though the New York Yankees have the giant budget and all the publicity and all that, which is a great history and stuff.
Right.
There's also some advantages to him not having some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he would want more resources, but if he had too many resources, he may not have the same drive that he has.
Right.
And so when he could have left for the Red Sox and decided not to, one of the reasons probably is he found his niche.
Yeah.
This is the place where he could do it the way that he
He's used to
likes
doing
to do it. He's
Yeah.
confident in doing it, and they're all in.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And you spoke earlier about needing trust from your team and building trust. How do you go about doing that when you find yourself in a new environment? I mean, you started at Ball State, then you're at Michigan, now you're back, so you've had at least had like 3 teams find trust in you. How do you go about doing that in your early stages?
Well, I think you cast a vision, and I think you try to build a relationship with the players. And so, you know, you hopefully try to learn them a little bit deeper. I think you got to show them that you care.
Right.
If they honestly believe that you care, then trust is going to start to be built. And trust takes time, though, and it takes experiences. So, you know, we're on the beginning of this journey right now because we've only been able to be together since, August. A year from now, those players that were in the program, there should be a deeper level of trust because over time,
It just
as
builds.
we experience, it just builds.
Right.
And, so that's one of the challenges, and it's again, one of the great rewards is the fact that when you build a relationship with people,
Mm-hmm.
that's really why you get into a job like being a coach.
Right.
Is the relationships is what's worthwhile, because normally you don't get in the coaching profession for monetary reasons like you might Major League Baseball.
Right.
You get into it because you want to develop positive relationships. You want to see someone else do really well, and you want to be a part of that.
And so being a part of that and seeing young men grow and blossom to who they are in society it's not something you can easily measure. How do you measure success as a coach? I know on the field you've had multiple conference coach of the year awards. You've had great success on the winning record, but is that how you measure your success as a leader, or is there a way you can define it otherwise?
No, the world will tell you that success is, the championships, and we've got several if you go through the room, and it's nice, and we've got several at the house and stuff, and we're thankful for that. But reality is, to me, a real success is if our student athletes end up being difference makers in their communities, and they really give them back to the communities wherever they decide to live. To me, that's a coach, if he has good influence, which to me is leadership, hopefully will be teaching these young men that it's bigger than themselves and that they have a wonderful platform and opportunity to make a difference in their community. Now, for some guys, it may be being they might be the Little League president. Somebody might be on a chair of foundation.
Right.
Somebody might own a business and start like one of my good friends, Jim Hess, did, and that was he started a breakfast club for the some of the inner city kids who wouldn't be able to, didn't have much going for them, and then he encouraged them and brought business people in to speak to them and really enrich their lives. So for me, the success of a coach is what are you guys doing, well after they're gone? Are they having some kind of impact?
Right.
And if they're having positive impact,
You've done your
then
job.
I think in some small way we've added value, and that's what I think a coach should be after. So the wins and losses really, they might be a big thing as far as keeping someone in a place.
Here and now they're important, but it's not the long-term goal you want.
Yeah, and a lot of times, if you do things the right way over time, you'll have your fair share of success. Certainly, like for me, in the last 2 years, we had some really hard times at Michigan in the last 2 years, but reality is, man, I had 8 years that were fantastic. So 2 that were little blips on the screen. I mean, in the big scheme of life, Billy Beane talked about a 5-year stint where they weren't very good.
Right.
And he talked about it going in cycles. So if we only measure ourselves based on wins and losses, it's nearly impossible to have it where you're always
Up
there.
Right.
And plus, if you always were, I'm
You
not
would
sure
appreciate
that
it.
you'd be the best that you could be.
Makes sense.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because when you go through those bumps in the road, man,
So you find out what you're really made of.
Yeah, you find out what you're made of. You find out your intestinal fortitude, your character, the fight that's in you. Like for me, I've always been my best when I have something to prove.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time I always try to have something to prove. But like right now, I feel like coming back to Ball State is like, I hope my team feels that way, but that's how I feel. I feel like, hey man, we all got something to prove.
Yeah.
And to me, that's fun. Trying to get a group of guys, including the coaching staff, who, hey, we all have something to prove.
Right.
Let's do it together.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And one last thing, what advice would you give to aspiring leaders?
I would say work real hard and be willing to do any of the menial tasks at whatever place that you're at. And do them with a joyful heart, and do them with great energy and great passion. And then my belief is that good leaders will recognize that, and Billy talked about it yesterday, and I know in my career I've been able to recognize that. When you find people that are willing to do those menial tasks and do them like superlative, those are the people that you want. They do them with like energy and joy, and there's no, man, why do I have to do that? Instead,
Right.
the attitude is, man, is there something else I can help you with?
Definitely.
And when they have that kind of attitude, that person can be dangerous in a positive way, because that person everybody will want that person, because we're not developing enough of those types of people, because we're living in this society now where there's a lot of sense of entitlement, like I'm entitled to get this or that.
Right.
But for true leaders, we want people who are the go-getters. We want people who are the type A's, the type that are not sitting back and they're not fence posters. They want to be involved in the action.
Yep.
We want people who have great character and have integrity and drive, and they don't have to be told exactly what to do. They're like looking for things to help the organization
Yep.
in a positive way. And so my advice would be to master all those little things that come your way, and if you do that, bigger things will be added to you, and I really believe that.
Very nice. Thank you, Coach, and I appreciate your time today.
Glad to do it, Blake.
Bye.
Bye. Outstanding.
That was perfect, Coach. I do appreciate it.
Oh.